All right, welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I'm your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 154, recording on Friday morning, April 3rd. Guest for you today is, for my money, one of the premier draft analysts in the space. His name is Fran Duffy. He puts together a draft guide. I believe it's the Die Hard Draft Guide, where it is all-encompassing. His rankings are phenomenal. He's got comps for every player. I'm going to link that below. But I know he watches the tape. I know he's done this for a long, long time. I know he really cares about doing it at a high level. So did a little bit of a speed round with Fran where we talked through 5 different subjects that I, as someone who covers this Vikings team on a daily basis, feel like are really relevant to ask. Some of them were specific to players like Dillon Thieneman. Some of them were more topical, like the center position and Brian Flores fit. So I think you guys will enjoy it. It's a little flavor of some late week draft podcast that we're going to do in the lead up, to the draft over the next few weeks. So I think you guys will enjoy it. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out. You can also hit the little like. I don't know. I mean, that might do something. It might not, but it can't hurt for sure. If you're listening on audio, that would be Apple, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast. You can rate and review and follow us, and I think hit like a little 5 stars, and that helps us out as well. But we'll always appreciate you guys listening. Never take it for granted. If you don't know me, like I said, I write about the team. I'm in the building during the season way too much, way too long, but I love it. I enjoy it, and can't wait for the draft, which is like 3 weeks away at this point. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by really good people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, they're Vikings fans. They're going to be, they'll probably be at the draft party and such. So, can't thank them enough for their support. And then Unreal. I'm repping it right now with this quarter zip that I'm wearing a lot these days. Minneapolis-based, St. Paul-based athleisure brand that's doing it at probably the highest level in the business right now. So please go check out Unreal. Before we get to Fran, because it was a pretty, rapid fire conversation with him, I did just want to talk a little bit about some of the tape study I've done on some of these draft guys in recent days and recent weeks. As far as the most prominent mentioned mock draft player for this Vikings team at number 18 is Dillon Thieneman by far. And Dillon Thieneman, for those of you who are just getting into this, is a safety who played a couple seasons at Purdue, and then he transferred to Oregon where he played for Dan Lanning. And that staff, I've obviously, the Vikings drafted Kyrie Jackson, and they've had Taki Taimani, so I've gotten to know some people up there at Oregon. And, they rave about Dillon Thieneman, the person, the character, how much, he wants it, how sharp he is just from a mental makeup standpoint. And when you pair that with the athleticism, and he blew away the combine from a running perspective, from a movement perspective, it's a pretty enticing player. Plus he's played at a high level. Believe his freshman year at Purdue, he had 6 interceptions, and he was playing from like a safety, single high safety, where he's ranging sideline to sideline. Then he transfers to Oregon, where, as I'll mention to Fran, like he's in more of a middle of the field kind of linebacker-ish safety role, and he played that really, really well. He's definitely improved as a tackler. Not a lot of blitz work on his tape, but you can imagine that working, even though sometimes in short areas he gets a little stiff. And so just an interesting player. It's always fascinating for me when you see the mock drafts look the same everywhere. And that's, all of the people I respect, the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world at NFL Network, Dane Brugler at The Athletic, Jordan Reed of ESPN, Field Yates of ESPN. All these guys, when they get to number 18 in their mock drafts, they have had Dillon Thieneman pegged in that spot. And that is always, again, it's at least a yellow flag for me of like, either everyone has a certain amount of intel on what the Vikings want to do, or it's just the easy spot that because everyone else is pigeonholing a guy there, like you feel comfortable doing that. And I mean, frankly, if you're asking me on where I'd fall with that, I would say it's probably more of the latter, just based upon conversations I've had, and that doesn't mean it's not possible. I'd also say, just as far as some of the film study, I mean, I've watched Caleb Downs at Ohio State. Like, he is phenomenal. He sees a lot. He can line up everywhere. He's communicating all over the place. You can see the football intelligence. He's really interesting. The other safety who I have watched is Emmanuel McNeil Warren, and Fran brings him up later in the show, but I mean, he's much taller. He's kind of a lean, tall, explosive athlete. He definitely, I mean, can fill in the run game. It's kind of funny watching him. He's always like fiddling with his mouth guard. You don't really, is that like, is he thinking about things? Kind of an interesting one, but it feels like he's probably a little more raw, which in the event that a Harrison Smith comes back, like, could he learn underneath him? I think that would be possible. But, I don't necessarily think that the Vikings have to or are guaranteed to draft a safety in the first round just because it's viewed as a need if you look at the depth chart. And that's, I mean, every team, every executive, every coach, it's always, we want to take best available. And that's a great thought in theory, but like, you're not just, like, you also want to fill holes in many ways. And so how the Vikings try to navigate that is interesting. I did ask Fran about one offensive player who I'll just use that as a teaser so you can listen through, but have found that player to be pretty interesting watching the tape, and it's kind of fun to think about what that fit would potentially look like. I brought up center with Fran because I would be pretty surprised at this point if the Vikings exited the 2026 draft without drafting a center. And then, it's interesting. Like, when you think about a lot of these running backs, there's obviously the tier of Jeremiah Love at the very top, and he is an exceptional back who is more than just that. He is an explosive offensive weapon who can catch out of the backfield and who has shown an ability to pass protect a little bit. And then it feels like there's a very clear drop off in tier where then you have Jadarian Price from Notre Dame. You've got Coleman from Washington. You've got Mike Washington at Arkansas and some of those guys. And then you've got probably another tier drop off of maybe the talent of a guy like Damon Claiborne from Wake Forest is interesting, but that position's going to be, I'll just be curious about. Receiver, I definitely think is a possibility, whether that's day two or even later on. And then, like, we're always talking about defensive tackles here, and you watch the tape a lot of these guys, and they're more just nose tackle, like, just kind of hold the point of attack as opposed to having any pass rush truce. And that's part of the reason when the Vikings transitioned from Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard, part of it was because, Brian Flores and the staff and the Vikings just overall felt like they could stop the run with from a more schematic standpoint, that you can find those types of nose tackle types if you absolutely need to, which the Vikings proved in the undrafted portion with Taki Taimani. So, it's hard to really come up with an interior defender who fits, of like the real pass rush capable, but also violent at the point of attack, run defender type of guy. So, I mean, I think that's what makes this pick in this first round so interesting. It's also, I mean, widely regarded as a draft that probably after pick like 12, from a real sheer talent perspective, like there is, I don't want to say a drop off, but there's just like a real step down in many ways of level of upside with a lot of these guys. And so that's really, I mean, one of the questions that I have as I monitor this thing over the next 3 weeks and obviously on draft night is, is it worth taking a let's just call it like a B to B plus level player at 18, as opposed to maybe trading down and still taking that level of player but recouping some draft capital? And could you be able to trade down, or would you be more willing to take a player who's more of an A player or A minus player at a position that may not be as much of a need, because you're just trying to accumulate the most talent you possibly can? Like those conversations, I think, is where we're going to fall a lot over these next few weeks as we get closer to the draft. But without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time. Fran and I had a really fun conversation. It was brief, but we're going to have more draft guests over the next few weeks. So hope you guys enjoy this. And yeah, here's Fran Duffy of Die Hard PHLY All City with the draft guide. Fran Duffy. Looking forward to this conversation. Fran, welcome back to the show. We're like 3 weeks to the draft, and I'm like, I haven't talked to Fran yet. I've been reading the Die Hard draft guide. I'm studying up. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate the support on the Die Hard Draft Guide. It's almost here though. I'm excited for the big weekend.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I was going through like your interior offensive line. I'm way down the list. I'm seeing comps to Blake Brandell, and that's how you know that you're really grinding. All right, I'm going to give you 5 questions, and some of them are specific to players. Some of them are broader topics, and we're just going to run through it real quick. All right, we'll start probably in a place you'd expect. Dillon Thieneman. Every mock draft in the world has Dillon Thieneman to the Vikings at number 18. Why do you think that is? What do you think about the fit? And yeah, you can start with those too.
I mean, I do like the fit. I do think that it's an easy connection to make. You know, Harrison Smith can kind of pass the torch over. Like I get that. I am always suspicious of the consensus picks, like outside of the top 10, top 15. It's very rare that, last year this was Jahad Campbell going to the Bucks at 17 or 19 or wherever they were. It happens every year. There's always a few. Very rarely do those picks actually happen. So, so I would say the Dillon Thieneman connection makes sense. I could absolutely see it, fitting with a Brian Flores defense. But again, I'm always a little bit suspicious that it'll actually come to fruition.
I think I was looking at like one of the mock draft websites that has the data for what is the percentage of fans. It was like 70% Dillon Thieneman, which is just absolutely wild. One more on him. Like when you think of his best strengths as a player, what comes to mind? Because I've watched the tape. I watched some of the Purdue stuff going back to his first stint in college. And then at Oregon, he's playing it's almost like a Tampa 2, like pole runner spot in the middle of the field on every snap. So really interesting player. But what are the strengths that come to mind and first and foremost when you think of him?
Well, it's definitely the versatility, and you mentioned the kind of the unique role that he was put in with the Oregon Ducks. But even watching at Purdue over the course of his career, there were times where he was the single high post safety, and he was productive in that role. There were times where they rolled him down to be the more traditional strong safety, and he was productive in that role. He's played over the slot. I don't think that he is. There have been like comparisons made to Cooper DeJean. I don't think that he's that level of coverage player to be able to hold up on an island that way, the way that DeJean was. But I think when you look at Thieneman, the versatility stands out, which I think would play well with a Brian Flores defense. But then overall, like the toughness, physicality, and the ball skills. And again, when you start checking a lot of those boxes, you feel good about the projection at safety.
The way I kind of thought about him, and I the people listening to this show might scream at me in the comments for this, but it's like it was almost like a little bit Cam Bynum-ish with maybe more athleticism. Like I don't know if that tracks with you at all, but that's just like what sparked in my mind. All right, number 2, do you think there's any way Caleb Downs gets close to 18?
I would not say that it's completely out of the question. Just because we do this every time when there's like a really, really good to elite safety is like, oh yeah, like this guy's one of the 10 best players in the draft. He's going to go in the top 10. And then every single time that player falls, it's like, oh, Nick Emenwari, he's a first round pick all day. Oh, Malachi Starks, he's a top 15 pick all day. And then Malachi Starks falls to the end of the first round and Emenwari falls completely out. You saw, again, Kyle Hamilton, same thing happened with him. So I would not completely rule this out. And again, it's another one where pretty much every mock draft has him going number 10 to Cincinnati. I don't know. I look at the Bengals, and that's an organization that typically values the premium positions. They want young guys at premium positions. And so it's like, yeah, they could take Reuben Bain over Caleb Downs. They could take, one of the pass rushers or a tackle or, so one of these other guys over Caleb Downs. And so I think at the end of the day, if Downs were to make it past Dallas at 12, which, probably unlikely, but certainly could happen because that would be the one team that I would say like, that's probably the ceiling, the floor. But if he falls past there, now you're in striking distance there for the Vikings.
What would be the reason he falls besides just the fact he's a safety? Like, is there any other negative to his game? Maybe like size? Is there anything that comes to mind with you to that question?
It's just the fact that he's not like an elite physical specimen. Like that would be the knock. I mentioned like, all right, Kyle Hamilton fell because he didn't run all that great, but he was a bigger safety. Derwin James fell, into this area of the draft because of the injury questions. Outside of that, though, like that would be the big knock on Downs. Like he's got all the intangibles. He hasn't been like uber productive, but I think when you look at his role in that defense, really over 3 different defenses, and it's kind of evolved for 3 different defensive coordinators, you can kind of explain the lack of production away. But his impact is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Alabama guy, so watching him that freshman year, I was like, what is even happening with this guy being a true freshman in this defense? All right. Number 3, and I'm kind of getting mad at myself the way I'm at. Like, if you're talking yourself out of Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, nobody, I mean, you haven't really seen that much from a mock standpoint to the Vikings, and they have TJ Hawkinson, who's in his final year now, and they have Josh Oliver, who's more of the block heavy guy, but he's just you got to imagine with the Vikings talking best available, like he is an explosive specimen there. So I haven't watched a ton of the tape. You obviously have. If you're talking yourself out of Kenyon Sadiq, what comes to mind for you with that question?
If you're talking yourself out of Sadiq, the big concern that you would have, and I would not justify these concerns, but I think the big thing would be like, oh well, he wasn't overly productive. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine, but George Kittle wasn't productive either. Like production is not always a precursor for NFL success at the tight end position. The other one would be the size. And you would say, okay, like he's not your traditional like inline presence. And now what I would say is while he is a certain type of blocker, he is a phenomenal blocker. Like when the way that he's able to insert on linebackers and, get up to safeties and, the way that they used him as a lead blocker out in space on perimeter plays and screens and, in the hole on downhill runs, like, yeah, you're not going to line up behind him and he's going to take on a defensive end. That's the Josh Oliver role. He's not going to be that guy. But if you're going to use him in multiple tight end sets and kind of have him on the move, he's phenomenal there. And so to me, I've got no questions and concerns about Sadiq. He's in my top 15 for that reason. I do think that he can have a huge impact in the NFL. And honestly, I love the fit there with Minnesota. I think that would make a lot of sense.
It's kind of funny because like, I've said a couple times this offseason, the people listening will know this. Like, I do think the Vikings have been after kind of a different bodied receiver. Now, this would be like a way different bodied receiver, but the idea for me, or I've seen it a little on the Oregon tape, like they'll put him in the backfield, they'll run a jet, and I'm like thinking about the way they align Justin, and what if they had a guy like Kenyon Sadiq doing that stuff? It would be pretty wild, kind of interesting. So anyway, I don't know. I just wanted to ask about that because it's kind of fascinating.
Because honestly, like if KOC wanted to kind of do some of the multi-tight end stuff that Sean McVay did last year and leaned into that a little bit more, and obviously we know like all the stuff going on with Addison. If you say like Sadiq projects to be our quote unquote wide receiver too, and that allows Addison to kind of fall down the pecking order a little bit, I really like that fit a lot. I think it would make a lot of sense.
We'll see. I don't know if I'll look back on this and be like, wow. Anyway, but all right, number 4, the centers. I think the Vikings are in the market for centers. So, who is your favorite center prospect, and why would that be?
For me, it's actually the center class kind of grew on me as the process went on. I would say that my favorite center is probably Auburn's Connor Lew. A little bit undersized, but a really good athlete, high intangibles, junior, so third-year player, played a good amount of football. Now, the problem is he's coming off a torn ACL. He tore his ACL back in October, so he should be good to go for training camp because it happened early enough in the season. But this is a guy that, again, has all the intangibles that you look for, probably would have been in that late first round discussion had he stayed healthy and had the senior year or the junior year that we were expecting him to have. But he was a top 30 player for me coming into the fall. I think that he would have been in that kind of range had he stayed healthy.
Do you think he could get out of round two?
Possibly, just because I think when you're talking about center, talking about scheme, the lack of scheme versatility. Not everybody's going to want a center like with his body type, just because again he's like slightly undersized from that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you're looking at him, he could fall out of round two, but I do think that he'll probably fall somewhere in round two.
Okay. Last one in the rapid fire 5-question round here. If you think about all the guys you've watched, and I'm putting you on the spot here, is there any defensive prospect where you're like, that is Brian Flores' defense? Like, that is this guy who loves positional versatility,
Yep.
violence, like, really bringing at the line of scrimmage, energy, athleticism, versatility, smarts. I probably should have tossed in there is huge. I don't know if there's anybody that comes to mind, and I'm really putting you on the spot with this one.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I'm just kind of buzzing through here real quick. I mean, obviously, and this is like Arvell Reese would be really fun, like in a Brian Flores, but obviously that goes without saying. As I'm looking through, and I think of some of the players that he has had a lot of success with. I think Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety from Toledo, would be a lot of fun, just because of the versatile usage there. And he's kind of played. If you go through and you just find like his best plays, he's got great plays playing in the deep half. He's got great plays playing close to the line of scrimmage. He can play from depth as a top down guy. Like he's a fun player. Going through, I would say as well. Some of like the pure, like Robert Spears Jones, the safety from Oklahoma, is a really big body kid who's got some athletic traits, who can come downhill and he can play against the run. So he would be one that I would kind of look at safety and say, okay, this would make some sense here. I look at corner. Let's see, man. I think that some of the big, like Devin Moore from Florida, is a guy that to me has unique size but unique movement skills on film. I was disappointed with what his workout looked like at the combine from a testing standpoint. I thought that he would run a little bit better, but this is a guy that I think that when you look at his size and his movement, would make a lot of sense there on the outside in terms of like. You could play one-on-one, leave him on an island, and he can go. Like Devin Moore is one of the few in this class, I think, that has that kind of that kind of upside. So I would say Devin Moore from Florida would be a corner that would stand out that way.
Those are good ones, and I know that's a tough one, but it's always fascinating, especially with a defense like this that is so hard to pin down, really, and what it is and what they want, as you well know. But that was fun, Fran. 3 weeks. We'll have you on and dig deeper at some point in the next few weeks. But this was a great primer. Looking forward to more of your coverage, and we'll obviously link the draft guide below because it's phenomenal. Thank you, Fran. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. We'll talk again soon.
All right, that'll do it for the conversation here on this Friday with Fran Duffy of All City, who has his Die Hard draft guide. Again, if you want more of Fran's content, I'm going to post that in the link below because I think he does a great job. And I know he puts in the time and really cares about trying to, be as accurate with his evaluations. I think so much of that is just having his own beliefs, regardless of kind of what the common stances are across the draft kind of ecosystem. So appreciate Fran hopping on. It was really fun. And as I said at the top, we're going to have more guests over the course of the next few weeks to talk through the draft and any specifics you guys want covered. I'd say throw them at me on social media at Alec_Lewis, at Alec Lewis Show. You can find us on Instagram. We're over there too. Again, DMs are open, everything's available, whatever questions you're curious about. Always love having those conversations. If you don't know, we're, tons of stories coming at The Athletic, draft related and more. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. It's sponsored by Unreal. And have a great weekend. Enjoy the Final Four. Masters is next weekend, one of my favorite sporting events of the year. So, fun part of the calendar. Get some relaxation in before the draft, and we will talk to you very, very soon.